The obsidian chamber of the Ethelgard High Council sat at the very apex of the spire, a needle of black crystal piercing the toxic, swirling clouds of their homeworld, Zalera. Here, the air was recycled to a crisp, metallic purity, contrasting sharply with the sulfurous storms raging kilometers below, a deliberate separation that symbolized the detachment of the ruling caste from the suffering of the soil. The room was vast, circular, and dominated by the hololith, a suspended sphere of hard light that projected the current state of the Ethelgard dominion. It was a map of conquest, a swirling galaxy of purple and gold, representing the star systems crushed under the heavy gravity of the Ethelgard fleets. But today, the golden hues were overshadowed by a heavy, pressurized silence, a silence that felt dense enough to crush the lungs of the council members seated around the obsidian table. High Exarch Vok, his chitinous armor polished to a mirrored sheen that reflected the grim faces of his peers, leaned forward, his mandibles clicking in a rhythm of suppressed agitation. He was a creature of war, built broad and low to the ground, his four eyes burning with the bioluminescent orange of a predator denied its kill. Beside him, Grand Archivist Liss, slimmer, taller, and draped in the silver weaves of the intelligentsia, studied a datapad with trembling claws, her pale blue eyes wide with a terror she struggled to mask behind a veneer of academic detachment. The subject of their gathering was a small, unassuming patch of the galactic arm, a dead zone previously thought devoid of intelligent life, now pulsing with a rhythmic, encoded signal that had begun to bleed into Ethelgard space. Humanity. "They are soft," Vok rumbled, his voice a subsonic growl that vibrated through the floor plates, resonating in the chest cavities of everyone present. "Their biology is pitiful, no exoskeleton, no natural weaponry. Their skin tears at the slightest abrasion, their bones fracture under standard gravity, and their lifespan is a blink of an eye compared to the cycles of the Dominion. We have analyzed the biological samples recovered from their derelict probes. They are water sacs held together by calcium and arrogance. Why have we not simply purged their system? Why does the Emperor hesitate?" Vok slammed his fist onto the table, shattering the silence but not the tension. The hololith flickered, zooming in on the Sol system, a collection of rocks orbiting a yellow dwarf star that seemed insultingly ordinary. To Vok, the very existence of this species was an affront to the biological perfection of the Ethelgard, who had spent 10,000 cycles genetically purifying themselves into the ultimate survivors. The idea that these Terrans had achieved faster-than-light travel was a cosmic joke, an anomaly that needed to be corrected with plasma and fire. Archivist Liss did not look up from her data, her voice thin but cutting through the heavy atmosphere like a laser scalpel. "Because High Exarch, the data does not align with your assessment of weakness. You look at their biology and see frailty. I look at their transmission logs and I see something else, something contradictory." She manipulated the hololith, bringing up a schematic of a human vessel captured by long-range sensors near the periphery of the nebula. It was blocky, ugly, devoid of the elegant curves and organic aesthetics of Ethelgard engineering. It looked like a brick thrown through a glass window. "This vessel," Liss continued, "has no shields, it has no discernible weapon ports. Its hull is thick, comprised of primitive alloys, yet it traverses the slipstream with a stability index higher than our dreadnoughts. They do not fight the currents of hyperspace, they ignore them. You call them soft, Vok, but a species that builds ships which ignore the laws of physics is not to be underestimated. We have captured their transmissions. They do not speak of war, they do not speak of conquest, they speak of maintenance." "Maintenance?" Vok scoffed, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. "They are mechanics, janitors of the void. We are the Ethelgard, we are the architects of the galactic order. If they are mere laborers, then let us enslave them. Our mines on the outer rim are always in need of biomass to operate the crushers. If they are so efficient at maintenance, they will serve the Dominion well." The other council members murmured in agreement, their predatory instincts aligning with Vok's aggression. To them, the galaxy was a hierarchy of strength. Those who could kill ruled, those who died served. The humans had shown no fleets, no armies, no fortresses. They had only sent small, solitary ships that drifted through the void, scanning, listening, and then vanishing. To the Ethelgard mind, this was the behavior of prey, of a scavenger species hoping to go unnoticed by the apex predators. "Do not be a fool, Vok," Liss snapped, finally looking you. Her eyes flashing with a rare anger. "You interpret silence as fear, I fear it is patience. We sent a subjugation demand 3 cycles ago. Submit or be incinerated." That was the message, standard protocol. Any other species would have responded with pleas for mercy or a desperate, chaotic mobilization of their fleets. The humans sent nothing, no counter-threat, no negotiation, just nothing. And then yesterday, the sensors in the zenith sector went dark, not destroyed, blinded. Whatever is out there didn't shoot our listening posts, it simply stepped in front of them. She gestured to the hololith, which now showed a gaping void in the sensor net, a black hole of information that was slowly expanding toward Zalera. They are coming, not with a fleet. The long-range scanners detect only one mass signature. One ship. Vok threw his head back and let out a chittering sound of amusement. They send one ship to answer a threat of extinction. This confirms their idiocy. They have no concept of scale. They believe a single diplomat can sway the might of the Ethelgard, or perhaps it is a suicide vessel packed with nuclear primitive fire. It matters not. I will mobilize the Grand Armada. We will meet this single ship with the fire of 1,000 suns. We will turn it into dust before it even breaks the gravity well of the outer moon. We will broadcast its destruction to their homeworld, and then we will begin the harvest. He stood up, his armor clanking, expecting the Emperor to nod from the shadows of the throne at the far end of the room. The Emperor, a massive, ancient being whose carapace had turned the color of dried bone, remained motionless, his many eyes fixed on the blank spot on the map. "Wait." The Emperor's voice was a whisper, dry as rust, yet it halted Vok mid-step. "Liss, you said the mass signature was singular. You did not specify its magnitude." The room went deadly quiet. The Emperor rarely spoke. When he did, it was law. Liss swallowed hard, her claws tapping a sequence into the table that caused the hololith to rescale. The projection of the approaching human object appeared, and next to it, for scale, the projection of the Ethelgard's largest flagship, the World Eater. The World Eater was a city in space, a vessel of terror that had ended civilizations. On the display, it looked like a speck of dust next to the human anomaly. "The magnitude is indeterminate, my Emperor," Liss whispered, her voice trembling. "The sensors cannot find the edges of it. It is not displacing space, it is folding it. It does not reflect radar, it absorbs it. It is not a ship in the sense that we understand. It is a solid object of artificial construction that rivals the mass of a small moon, and it is moving at 90% of light speed without generating a wake." The council stared in horror. The physics of such a thing were impossible. To move that much mass without tearing the fabric of reality required energy output greater than the total consumption of the entire Dominion. Vok sat down slowly, his mandibles slack. The arrogance drained from his posture, replaced by a primal confusion. A species of soft, weak water sacks had built a moon and were flying it toward Zalera. "It arrives in 1 standard hour," Liss added, the final nail in the coffin of their confidence. "And it is hailing us. Not on the military frequencies, not on the diplomatic channels. It is broadcasting on the emergency relief bands, the frequency used for natural disasters, for planetary evacuations." The hour that followed was a blur of frantic, terrified activity that stripped the Ethelgard hierarchy of its dignity. The Grand Armada, the pride of the Dominion, launched from the orbital shipyards, a sea of titanium and plasma cannons that blotted out the stars. They formed a defensive sphere around Zalera, a glittering shell of destructive potential that had never been breached. Yet, to the commanders on the bridges of those dreadnoughts, the display felt hollow. They watched their sensor screens, waiting for the enemy fleet, but there was only the void. And then the stars began to disappear, not one by one, but in a sweeping curtain of darkness. The human vessel did not warp in with a flash of Cherenkov radiation. It simply arrived by sliding out of the darkness, a shadow that became solid. It was a monolith, a slab of matte black material that defied visual comprehension. It was a rectangular prism, simple, brutal, and geometric, rotating slowly with a majestic, terrifying weight. It had no engines, no exhaust ports, no bridge towers, no weapon batteries. It was a sheer cliff face of metal that stretched for kilometers, dwarfing the Ethelgard fleet like a whale surfacing beneath a school of minnows. The Ethelgard ships, panicked by the sheer gravitational displacement of the object, scattered, their formation breaking as their proximity alarms screamed of imminent collision. The human ship, if it could be called, that hung in the upper atmosphere of Zalera, its shadow casting a twilight over half the planet. The storms below ceased, the atmospheric turbulence quelled by the sheer stabilizing mass of the visitor. Inside the High Council chamber, the view from the glassed dome was apocalyptic. The sky had been replaced by a ceiling of dark metal. Vok was trembling, his claws gripping the edge of the obsidian table until it cracked. "Fire," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Order the fleet to fire, all batteries, everything." "Belay that order," the Emperor roared, standing for the first time in a century, his ancient frame shaking with effort. Look at the energy readings, you fool. That object is radiating a containment field. If we fire plasma at it, the containment will reflect it back tenfold. We would be bombing ourselves. He turned his many eyes toward Liss. Open the channel, the relief frequency. Let us hear what the monsters have to say. Liss activated the comms. The static cleared instantly, replaced by a signal of perfect clarity. There was no visual, only audio. The voice that filled the chamber was calm, melodious, and terrifyingly casual. It sounded like a teacher speaking to an unruly classroom or a doctor addressing a patient. It lacked the growl of a warrior or the hiss of a politician. It was the voice of someone who was in absolute control. "This is the Terran Engineering Corps vessel Atlas," the voice said. "We received a distress beacon from this system. Pattern analysis indicated a civilization in the pre-collapse stage of social and environmental decay, exhibiting extreme aggression due to resource scarcity. We are here to render assistance. Please lower your weapons. They are a hazard to navigation." Vox stared at the speaker, his brain unable to process the words. "Distress beacon, assistance." "We sent no distress beacon," he roared at the ceiling. "We sent a declaration of war. We are the Ethelgard Dominion. We demand you surrender your vessel and submit to our authority." There was a pause on the line, a pause that felt like a parent taking a deep breath before explaining something simple to a child. "We received your transmission," the human voice replied, sounding almost sympathetic. "The submit or be incinerated message. In our culture, threats of that nature from a Type 07 civilization are classified as a cry for help. Only a society on the brink of collapse resorts to such posturing. We have scanned your planet. Your atmosphere is 90% toxic due to industrial runoff. Your core is cooling. Your population suffers from malnutrition despite your vast empire. You are not conquerors, you are starving refugees in a burning house. We are here to put out the fire." "We do not need your pity," Vox screamed, his pride shattering. "We are strong, we have conquered 1,000 worlds." "You have strip-mined 1,000 worlds," the voice corrected gently. "There is a difference. We are sending a shuttle down to your capital structure. We request a meeting with your leadership to discuss the installation of the tectonic stabilizers. Please clear a landing zone. And please move the little ships. The Atlas emits a passive gravwake that might shear their wings off if they get too close." The link cut. The council sat in stunned silence. The insult was total. The humans didn't even consider them a threat. They considered them a cleanup project. Vox looked at the Emperor. The ancient ruler sank back into his throne, a strange emotion rippling across his face. It wasn't anger, it was relief. "Let them land," the Emperor whispered. "If they wanted us dead, we would be dead, that thing above us. It is not a warship, it is a tool, and if that is their tool. I do not wish to see their weapons." The shuttle that descended from the Atlas was a stark contrast to the behemoth above. It was a smooth, white teardrop, silent and elegant, landing on the Spire's private docking platform with a grace that made the Ethelgard interceptors look clumsy. The council assembled in the landing bay, flanked by the elite Praetorian Guard, hulking warriors with plasma scythes. Vox stood at the front, determined to salvage some scrap of dignity. The shuttle ramp lowered and mist curled out. A single figure walked down. It was bipedal, soft-skinned, wearing a simple blue jumpsuit with a patch on the shoulder that read Terran Engineering Corps. No armor, no weapons, no guards. The human was small, coming up only to Vox's chest. It had pale skin and tufts of brown hair, and its eyes scanned the towering alien warriors with a look of mild curiosity rather than fear. "I'm Chief Engineer Holloway," the human said, tapping a device on his wrist that translated his words instantly into the guttural Ethelgard tongue. "Nice place you have here, majestic architecture. Shame about the air quality, though. My filters are working overtime just standing in the bay." He looked up at Vox, extending a soft, five-fingered hand. Vox stared at the hand, unsure if it was a weapon or a ritual. "I am High Exarch Vox," the alien rumbled, refusing the gesture. "You stand in the presence of the High Council. You have invaded our sovereign space." Holloway pulled his hand back and shrugged. "Invaded is a strong word. We prefer unsolicited renovation. Look, Exarch, we can do this the hard way or the easy way. The hard way is you keep posturing. We ignore you, fix your planet, and leave you the bill. The easy way is you tell your fleet to stand down so we can deploy the geospikes and stabilize your planetary core before it stops spinning completely. Our scans show you have about 50 years before magnetic field collapse. Then, poof. No more atmosphere, everyone dies. You can restart a planetary core." Liss stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. "That is theoretically impossible, the energy required." Holloway smiled, a gesture that showed his blunt, flat teeth. For you, maybe. For us, it's a Tuesday. We use a localized singularity injection. It's standard procedure for terraforming. Listen, we're not here to fight. We really aren't. We saw your message, realized you guys were desperate, and came to help. We find that species usually stop trying to incinerate their neighbors once they have enough food and clean air. Vok bristled. You mock us, you treat us like children. We treat you like a young species, Holloway said, his voice losing its lightness and gaining a sudden, heavy gravity. Because you think war is power, you think conquest is strength. You're playing with firecrackers in a sandbox. He gestured up at the massive shadow of the Atlas hanging above the clouds. We build stars, we move black holes, we weave the fabric of spacetime to build highways between galaxies. If we wanted to conquer you, we wouldn't send a fleet. We would just turn off your sun. The silence that followed was absolute. The Praetorian Guard shifted uneasily. The sheer casual nature of the threat, which wasn't delivered as a threat but as a statement of fact, chilled Vok to his core. Why, the Emperor spoke from the back of the group, stepping into the light. Why help us? We threatened you. We would have killed you if we could. Why bring your terrible starship here to save your enemies? Holloway looked at the Emperor, his expression softening. Because we used to be you? A long time ago, we fought over dirt. We killed each other for resources. We screamed at the dark forest, hoping nothing would answer. But we survived, and we made a rule. When we see someone screaming at the dark, we don't shoot them. We turn on the lights. This ship, Vok gestured weakly at the sky, it is not a warship. The Atlas, Holloway laughed. God, no, this is a heavy lifter. It's a construction barge. It carries equipment for star lifting and planetary repair. It's got the defensive capabilities to shrug off a supernova, sure, but offensive weapons? None. We don't put guns on our engineering trucks. The realization hit the Ethelgard like a physical blow. The ship that had terrified their entire empire, the ship that had made their grand armada look like toys, was a truck. It was a utility vehicle. The implication of what a human warship would look like was a thought too terrifying to entertain. If this was their shovel, what did their sword look like? Now, Holloway clapped his hands together. Can we get to work? I've got a schedule to keep. There's a binary system 3 sectors over that's about to collide, and I need to install a gravity buffer by next week. The following days were a humiliation and a revelation for the Ethelgard. They watched as the Atlas released swarms of drones, silver specks that descended into the atmosphere. They didn't fire lasers. They fired scrubbing beams that broke down the toxins in the air, turning smog into oxygen and inert dust. Massive spikes were driven into the planet's crust, pulsing with rhythmic energy that vibrated deep into the mantle, restarting the convection currents of the core. The skies cleared for the first time in centuries, revealing the stars in all their glory. The acid rain stopped. The crops began to grow at an accelerated rate, fed by nutrient bombs dropped from orbit. Vok stood on the balcony of the spire, watching the transformation. He felt small. He felt obsolete. The martial culture he had dedicated his life to was being dismantled not by force but by benevolence. It was infuriating. It was humbling. He found Holloway one evening, standing on the landing platform, watching the sunset. The human was drinking a liquid from a flask, looking tired. It is done, Vok asked, his voice lacking its usual growl. Mostly, Holloway said. Air's clean, core's stable. We left you some fabricators to keep the food supply up. You shouldn't need to raid the outer rim anymore. You ask for nothing in return, Vok said, struggling with the concept. No trip. No slaves, no territory. We don't need your territory, Holloway said. Space is infinite. Resources are infinite if you know how to harvest them. We don't fight over scraps. Then what are you? Vok asked. If you are not conquerors, if you are not warriors, what are humans? Holloway looked at the alien, his eyes reflecting the dying light of the sun. We're gardeners. We tend the garden. We pull out the weeds, sure, but mostly we just try to make things grow. And if the weeds fight back? Vok asked. Holloway's expression darkened. For a split second, the friendly engineer vanished, and something ancient and terrifying peered out from behind his eyes. Then we bring the weed whackers, and trust me, Vok, you don't want to see the weed whackers. The Atlas is a ship of life, the ships of death. We keep those locked away. We haven't had to use them in 1,000 years. We pray we never have to again. Vok shivered. He believed him. But the story did not end with the departure of the Atlas. As the human ship prepared to leave, a signal pierced the void. It did not come from the humans nor from the Ethelgard. It came from the deep dark, from the intergalactic void beyond the rim. It was a scream. a psychic and digital scream that overloaded the sensors of the Atlas and the Ethel Guard alike. The sky turned a bruised purple. Space itself seemed to bruise. Holloway tapped his wrist furiously. "Command, what is that?" Reading a massive dimensional breach in Sector 0. The voice from the Atlas boomed, no longer calm but urgent. "Holloway, get back to the ship. We have a Category 5 incursion. The veil is tearing." "What is happening?" Vok demanded, sensing the sudden shift in the atmosphere. The fear radiating from the human was palpable. "We were wrong," Holloway said, his face pale. "We thought we had more time. The Great Filter, it's not a theory, it's a predator, and it's here." The sky above Zalera ripped open. It wasn't a wormhole, it was a wound. From the tier, geometry that hurt the eyes began to pour out. Crystalline shards, jagged and wrong, twisting in impossible angles. They were not ships, they were entities of pure entropy, devourers of reality. They descended not on the planet, but on the Atlas. "They hunt the light," Holloway whispered. "They hunt advanced civilizations. They sense the energy output of our repairs." We rang the dinner bell. "You led them here," Vok roared, reaching for his plasma pistol. "We are the only thing standing between them and you," Holloway shouted back. "The Atlas isn't a warship, but it's the only thing big enough to hold the door shut." High above, the Atlas began to change. The monolithic block shifted. Panels opened, revealing not guns, but blindingly bright emitters. The ship became a star, glowing with pure white energy. It moved to intercept the crystalline swarm, physically ramming the entities, using its gravitational mass to crush them. But there were too many. The shards swarmed over the human vessel, tearing at its hull. "We can't hold them," Holloway said, listening to the comms. "Shields are failing. If the Atlas falls, this entire system will be consumed." Vok looked up at the battle. He saw the weak humans dying to protect a world that had threatened them. He saw the truck holding the line against a cosmic horror. He looked at his own hands, the claws of a predator. He looked at the Grand Armada hovering uselessly in orbit, their commanders waiting for orders. "Liss," Vok shouted into his comms. "The human ship creates a gravity well. If we fire into it, the plasma will be trapped, concentrated." "Yes," Liss replied, her voice steady. "But it requires a target lock. The humans are moving too fast." "Link our targeting computers to their transponder," Vok ordered. "We will not be spectators in our own destruction. All ships, form up on the human vessel's flank, target the crystals, fire at will." For the first time in history, the Ethel Guard fleet did not fight for conquest. They fought for survival, side by side with the aliens they had despised. The Grand Armada rose, thousands of ships pouring fire into the swarm attacking the Atlas. The human ship, sensing the assistance, rotated, creating a shield wall to cover the Ethel Guard advance. "They are assisting us," the Atlas commander's voice came over the channel, surprised. "Holloway, the locals are fighting back." "They're stubborn," Holloway grinned, drawing a pistol from a concealed holster at his ankle. "I like them." The battle raged for hours. The sky was a kaleidoscope of destruction. The Atlas took heavy damage, its massive hull scarred and burning, but it refused to yield. The Ethel Guard fleet took losses, ships crushed by the crystalline entities, but they held the line. Finally, the Atlas routed power to its main drive, not to escape, but to overload. "They are going to detonate their singularity core," Liss screamed. "They will wipe out the swarm, but the ship will be destroyed." "Ed." "No," Vok said. "Signal the fleet, tow cables, tractor beams, grab them." It was a maneuver of insanity. The Ethel Guard dreadnoughts, tiny compared to the human vessel, latched onto the Atlas with every tractor beam they had. They pulled, straining their engines to the breaking point, dragging the wounded giant away from the tier in space. Simultaneously, the Atlas ejected its core, not the ship, but the containment unit. The unit flew into the tier and detonated. The explosion was silent, a flash of white that erased the crystalline swarm and sealed the breach. The shockwave knocked the Ethel Guard ships spinning, but they held onto the Atlas. Silence returned to the system. The tier was gone. The Atlas drifted, dark and wounded, but alive. Holloway tapped his comms. "Atlas, report." "We are here, Chief. Heavy damage. Main drive offline, but we are intact, thanks to the neighbors." Vok looked at Holloway. The human was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, dust covering his jumpsuit. The alien exarch extended his hand, not a claw, but an open palm, mimicking the human gesture he had rejected earlier. "You said you are gardeners," Vok rumbled. Holloway took the hand. "We try to be." Then, Vox said, looking up at the battered, terrible starship that had saved them all, "We will be the walls. A garden needs a wall to protect it from the wild. We have the fleets. You have the life. We will build the wall." Holloway smiled, a genuine, tired smile. "Deal, but you guys are paying for the paint." The alliance forged that day changed the galaxy. The Ethelgard ceased their conquests, turning their fleets into the shield of the Terran alliance. The humans continued their work, fixing stars, healing worlds, and preparing for the day the Great Filter returned. They were no longer weak. They were the mind, and the Ethelgard were the sword. And deep in the void, the enemies of life learned to fear not just the terrible starship, but the fleet that stood beside it. The humans had not been met by a ship of war, but by a ship of peace, and that had made all the difference. Because a ship of war can only destroy, but a ship of peace can build an alliance that nothing can break. The council chamber was quiet again, but the air was no longer heavy. It smelled of ozone and rain, filtered in from the healing world outside. The hololith showed a new map, not purple and gold, but a mix of colors, spreading out into the dark, pushing back the unknown. And at the center, the symbol of the Ethelgard and the symbol of Terra locked together, the garden and the wall. Vox sat at the table, watching the repair drones buzz around the distant hull of the Atlas. "Liss," he said quietly. "Yes, hi, Exarch. Next time they send a diplomat, have some coffee ready. Holloway says it is essential for their biology." "I will add it to the archives," Liss replied, a hint of a smile in her voice. The galaxy was vast and the dark was deep, but they were no longer facing it alone. The humans were strange, soft, and terrifyingly powerful in their gentleness. They had come with a terrible starship that wasn't a ship, and they had conquered the Ethelgard without firing a shot. And Vok, the old warrior, was perfectly fine with that.